Strange village. Listen, and repeat. In a small and quiet village lived a group of people, although they were at the turn of the 21st century, but they knew nothing about the outside world except what they saw in front of them, but what distinguishes them the most is their strange ties to each other. Where you find them in that village living as if they were from the same family, there is no difference between them, and no one forgets to hold an occasion unless he invites all his neighbors without exception. As well as they are predominantly nervous in tribalism, they categorically refuse to marry off their children from outside that ocean. And they had Uncle Thomas the Elder, who was over 100 years old, and his body was still like 1 in 30, he had enough grandchildren and children to build an entire kingdom. He imposed his authority over the entire village, gave birth to a granddaughter named Miriam whom he saw in her grandmother, and did not want to marry. Although more than 30 years have passed since her departure, her features resembled her, as well as her ideas, boldness and ambition. He said Mary's father was weak and fragile, only made a decision and his father had to get into it, as his youngest son, the only one of his son, was alive. He said Mary's father was weak and fragile, only made a decision and his father had to get into it, as his youngest son, the only one of his son, was alive. She was just like her, not more than 20. Teresa was not her deceased grandmother because she knew her picture. She tried to ask her father about the owner of the picture and he refused to tell her, and told her not to talk about this topic in front of your grandfather, and not to ask me more about it. That village was ending with a fence of thorns surrounding it on the opposite bank of the river. Near the fence there are 4 ferocious dogs of Uncle Thomas guarding the area very carefully, shattering the flesh of any stranger whose feet set foot in the area. A 40-year-old woman would come every day to try to get closer to that village, but retreat for fear of dogs. One day, while Mary was walking near the river, she saw a strange movement, which she followed. And when she was surprised by what she saw, it was that same woman I glimpsed in the photos, so the dogs, disabled with some leftovers, and rushed behind that strange lady, and grabbed her by the arm, telling her not to be afraid, "Aunt, I just want to know who you are." The lady replied, "Surely you are Mary, Thomas's granddaughter, and the eldest daughter of his youngest son." Then I invited her to her house, and when Mary entered she was surprised by 2 young men, one of whom entered the house, the other who stayed away, and said to him, "Who this stranger who stands near your house? She must be a thief." So she approached him and shouted at him that the owner of the house invited her, and then that 40-year-old woman approached her, and told her that she was her aunt, and that Thomas was her father. But when the grandfather wanted after the death of the grandmother to marry his daughter to one of his relatives, she ran away, after which she met a young man, and married him, and gave birth to a son and lived with him happy, but she wanted her father to forgive her before she died. She suffers from leukemia in its final stages. Mary promised her that she would convince her grandfather of this, but the aunt urged her not to tell anyone, because her illness is a secret. Even her husband and son do not know him, and she said to her, "I will convince him in my way and we will help you to may God heal you." As Mary was on her way back to that strange village, she came across that young man as a friend of her cousin, and quarreled with him again, then told him, "You're despicable, how do you kick me out of a house that's not yours?" At home, she told her mother about it, and she hurt and told her, "I don't think your grandfather will forgive her, even when he knows about her illness. I know people about his cruelty and pride," and her father didn't know about his sister's illness, but he told her not to tell your grandfather that you were there. I don't want to lose my daughter." But she insisted and insisted as usual, so she went to him, and when she mentioned her aunt's name directly, he got angry and slapped her for the first time and said to her, "I will force you to marry one of the villagers. A young man from this village is coming to you." As soon as he heard his daughter's name, he panicked and feared that the scene would be repeated, which made him feel frustrated, defeated and ashamed, he said. Then she came back to her mother's lap crying and saying, "I won't marry that guy no matter what happens," and in the same way I got out of the village before. She sneaked again, and went to her aunt's house, and she was crying, not wearing a coat, and the rain was falling heavily, and if a coat was thrown on her back. Henry was Manuel's friend, and she thanked him and told him, "I didn't know you were so polite," and she went into her aunt's house and gave him the coat, and after she entered her cousin Manuel welcomed her and told her aunt that she would. Manuel heard what that old man had done, and he became very angry and decided to go to him after he knew he was his grandfather, but the dogs smashed his flesh before stepping foot at the entrance to the fence, and Manuel died and his father found him dead. Manuel had a fiancée, Henry's sister, who whispered in the aunt's ear to expel Mary, describing her as the cause of all the misfortunes. They lived quietly until she came to them, after which Manuel's father decided to go to Grandpa Thomas to face him. Henry tried to stop him, but he insisted and went and almost perished as well, but Henry advanced and confronted the dogs as they almost ravaged him, but he did not hide and resisted them with all his might. The grandfather came forward with a gun, and his daughter came after her, along with the fiancée of the deceased Manuel and his granddaughter Mary, and Manuel's fiancée was carrying in her hand a herb that caused the distortion of the face, which she threw on the face of that old man. His radiant face turned into a completely burned and disfigured face. The dogs rained on Thomas because they did not recognize their owner. Henry was taken to the hospital and received the necessary treatment, and Henry became engaged to Mary. As for the dogs, when they realized the absence of their owner, they panicked and left the village, and their strength suddenly disappeared and became helpless. The village was quiet for a while, then it was full of activity in many schools, hospitals, churches, and mosques were opened. The noise returned to the village after it looked like a cemetery. As for Mary, she married Henry, and his sister was vehemently rejecting her and decided to leave the whole town, and about the aunt, she began to take her medicine saying that she was improving. All the unjust laws of the village that were in force during the reign of Thomas changed, and then that village became one of the most active villages in the region, and those pent-up dreams that were within all the inhabitants of that village were realized. Peace and happiness spread in it. But Mary's son had selfish, arrogant behaviors similar to their grandfather, which made everyone afraid that another Thomas would be born to them, returning their village to its darkness where they lived for nearly 100 years, and destroying everything they had built so that they would return to the starting point. But dreams cannot die or be erased, and if someone controls them for some time, or suppresses them, there must come a day and explode, and that is not by surrender or acquiescence, but by hard work.
I hope you liked the story and that you have benefited from it. Please do not forget to share it with your friends so that everyone benefits. Goodbye.